Alright, so we're going to go through the development of self-government in the American colonies. These notes are going to need to be taken and studied so that you're ready for a team-based learning quiz that you'll take next class. So, development of self-government in the 13 American colonies. This all begins with King John, who is the ruler of England at the time, being abusive in his power. You have this idea of divine right of kings during this time period, and that's that the king can basically do whatever it is that they please to do, or the monarch can do whatever they choose to do, including putting people in prison just because, hey, I don't like you today, sentencing people to death without a trial, just any and everything that they want to do. So as King John is using these unfair practices to control people, like unfair taxes, limiting people's basic rights, and a dictatorial style of leadership overall, people sense that some things need to change. So the establishment for the foundation of self-government begins with King John's actions angering the people of England, specifically the English nobles. So they're going to use their political and economic power to force King John to sign a charter that protects fundamental rights of the people. This charter will be signed on June 15th, 1215, and it becomes known as the Magna Carta, or the Great Charter. The Magna Carta is going to limit the king's power and protect specific individual rights of the people, like due process of law, property protection, and proper taxation. Due process, in essence, is just you having proper procedures before a punishment is issued. So you properly being put into prison, not staying for too long a period of time, having a lawyer for a trial, having trials by jury, etc., etc., etc. And so, although many of these rights are going to be protected under the Magna Carta, it only serves a small portion of the population, specifically wealthy nobles. Okay, but it will serve as a foundation for future protection for all people. The significance of the Magna Carta, or why you need to know this, is that it's the first written Western document acknowledging the protection of individual rights. English tradition and structures are going to serve as an example for future English and colonial documents. My little rhyme for this one, for you to try to remember it, is that the Magna Carta in 1215 limits the power of the English king. It's important that you remember that this is first. It's way before pretty much anything that we really study. So, 1215, 13th century, Magna Carta. Alright, the Magna Carta is going to lead us towards the English Bill of Rights. This occurs in 1689. English Parliament, and Parliament's their lawmaking body, is going to further the protection of individual rights by forcing the King of England to sign into effect the English Bill of Rights. It's going to serve as an example for the Colonial Bill of Rights, as well as the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, which becomes known as the Bill of Rights. And if you're looking at the English Bill of Rights and the United States Bill of Rights, you'll see that there are some things that are very similar, okay, and rights that people feel need to be protected in both settings. You have to remember that, of course, the United States is going to be developed from people who used to be English citizens, and so they're going to want these fundamental basic rights to be protected in this new nation that will end up being created, including protection from cruel and unusual punishment, excessive fines and bail, speedy trial, trial by jury, not having laws just suspended because, hey, I don't like that law, by your executive, things of that sort. Alright, so Englishmen and women who travel to the New World consider themselves to be English citizens. And as citizens of England, they expect to maintain their English rights while they're in the American colonies. So, yes, they are in America. Yes, they are 3,000 miles away. However, they still consider themselves to be English citizens up until the point, and even many people past the point of the American Revolution beginning. So, distance from England is going to make it pretty difficult for things to happen in an expedited manner, because you are 3,000 miles away and you don't have planes, you don't have steamboats or anything like that. So if you need something done, you can't really wait the months that it takes for news to travel from America to Europe, back from Europe to America once a decision's been made. So your colonists are going to start to create their own laws in order to ensure peace and order in the colonies. To maintain their rights, especially in isolated communities, they established colonial governments that would support self-government and the protection of individual rights. Protestantism in particular is going to aid in this because it calls for independent churches, which use self-government. They elect members who govern the churches, and this is in a vast contrast to what citizens in England were used to when it was a Catholic nation, and Catholicism relies heavily on a centralized hierarchy, where you have the priests, the bishops, the cardinals, and then ultimately things are flowing down from the Pope. So, three of these colonial governments that you need to be aware of are the Virginia House of Burgesses, the Mayflower Compact, and the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. Okay, so your results of colonial self-government, your colonists believe that their rights as British citizens were secured by both the British and colonial governments. England doesn't fully enforce colonial regulations, which we talked about before, and that's called salutary neglect. The distance ultimately is one of your main reasons for this salutary neglect. So the long distance from centralized government and the practice of salutary neglect caused the colonists to become self-governing and politically self-sufficient. They don't really need British rule. They're handling their business pretty well on their own. Right? It would not be until the British government threatens the status of American colonists' self-government that the colonists decide that they're going to rebel. So once you're comfortable in a situation and you've got things going and you're just kind of trucking along, community's doing well, and then all of a sudden the British want to come in and enforce laws that they hadn't in forever and take away the governments that you have established, that's when people start to, scratch their heads and they're like, all right, we don't know about this. All right, so the Virginia House of Burgesses is established in 1619. It's going to serve as the first colonial assembly in the 13 colonies. A colonial assembly is going to consist of people that are elected as representatives to the government. They're going to meet to determine laws and governmental policy for everyone within the colony. The Virginia House of Burgesses, significance, as that is the first representative government in the colonies. The Mayflower Compact is in 1620. The Pilgrims and the Puritans are traveling to Virginia on the Mayflower, but they encounter a storm and end up with a terrible navigation failure and end 1,000 miles off course in Massachusetts. So they're outside of the jurisdiction of the Virginia law, meaning that everything that they had agreed to and said, okay, we're going to this community and this is what we're going to do and this is how things are going to be run, will not happen because they are not in Virginia. So the male members of the Mayflower are going to draw up a social contract and guarantee a democratic system of government and protection of individual rights there, now in Massachusetts where they've landed. This agreement is based on principles of self-government and majority rule. So what the majority of people would like to do within the community, that's what we're going to do in order to make this new colony we have to establish work, since we didn't end up where we're supposed to be. All right, think about whose jurisdiction you're under and name several, living where we live. Think about that and we'll go over that information in class next time. All right, next up is the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. This is going to serve as the first written colonial constitution. So that's your significance of this one, first written colonial constitution. It's adopted in 1639, and the Constitution is going to protect individual rights of the colonists in Connecticut. The founder, Thomas Hooker, is going to allow non-church members to vote. It's going to establish a religiously tolerant government. The Constitution is going to serve as an example for future colonial constitutions by having 3 branches of government. All right, and the last thing that we need to go over with these notes is the idea of freedom of the press. During the colonial period, an individual, John Peter Zenger, publishes a newspaper that criticized the royal governor of New York. Because of his criticism, he is arrested and put on trial for libel. The lawyer is going to prove that what he wrote was true, and so they commit a crime, and freedom of the press is going to be established. So today, we are allowed to criticize public officials. You can point out wrongdoing by the government. You have free expression and dissent, And freedom of the press is one of those things that's protected in the First Amendment. Right. Ultimately, all of these ideas are going to form the roots of the tree of liberty that we enjoy today in America. We'll also discuss some of your philosophers and thinkers who lead us to things like separation of powers, the ideas of unalienable rights, and things of that sort in class as well.